Good morning. My name is Paul Sanchez, and this is my first video, and I'm going to explain what are the differences between real and specification limits. Okay, let's start. We have first the real limits, that it's also called control limits or natural process limits. So what is real limits? You have, for example, here in the figure 1, you have a process. Let's say that the process is, or the product, you're producing chocolate, and that chocolate has a percentage of sugar. I mean, the sugar is in tune. So you want that the percentage of sugar has to be, let's say, 30%. So usually the control limits in this case is defined based on the average performance of the process. So here the company maybe has the capability to produce chocolate with a percentage of 30%, with a percentage of 30 about sugar. So in this case, the company is capable. I mean, it has the chance to produce that kind of chocolate. Now this is the side of the process. This is the side for the company. Also, well, in this case, control limits. Let's continue. Control limits describe what a process is capable of producing. It's what we were talking about. Here, for example, you have a chart, and here you have the control limits. You have the center line and the upper control limit and the lower control limit. Here in the figure you can notice that there are measurements that are out of the control limits. Also, the control limits are called the voice of the process, because it's that your company, your process, your machines says to you that they are capable to do it. I mean, if your machines are not capable, you cannot produce sugar with a 30% of sugar. Sorry, you cannot produce chocolate with a 30% of sugar. Now let's talk about specification limits. Specification limits is more of the side of the customer. It's the customer expectations, and also it's called the voice of the customer. How we said about real limits, it's the voice of the process, and now the specification limits is the voice of the customer. It's the other side. But what happened here in the specification limits? I think it's more important because it's the voice, how we said, it's the voice of the customer, and if the clients or your customers don't receive that they want, they will cause that, well, your sales going down. So as a summary, we were talking about differences, the definition. So what differences? We first talk about process, and then we talk about customer. So here we have both together. You can see the upper control level and the lower control level, and you can see the target, and also you can see the upper specification level and the lower specification level. In this case, the specifications limits are inside of the control limits. So in other words, you can say that your company is capable to produce the product that the customer wants. Another thing that we can see, and that's what I was looking, it's about, I noticed two things: that a signal is defined as a single point outside of the control limits. You can see in the control graph that we are showing in a few minutes. And also that a process is also considered out of control if there are 7 consecutive points still inside the control limits but on one single side of the mean. What I'm trying to say is that the first one is then the figure that is in the left, on the left, sorry. And you can see points that are out of the control limits. So this is a signal that obviously everyone can notice that it's out of control, and we have to take some actions to fix it. And on the right side, you can this is the second bullet that says that if you see 7 consecutive points, there is something that is out of control. For example, you have the target, and you can see that the measurements are, let's say, around of the target, but then you can see 7 consecutive points. So in this case, this is also called something out of control, and it has to be measuring or maybe investigate why is happening that. Another thing is that I look about DOI, that it says that DOI is the sign of experiment, that it helps you can predict after how many units the error can occur. I mean, when it will start producing non-conforming units, with DOI you can study that and you can then predict that to not make mistakes in your company. It will help you to take appropriate actions before any damage had happened, as I said. So as a conclusion, we have first that real limits or control limits and specification limits helps you to have the process under control. Also, to controlling revenue leakage, I mean the rework, product variation, you won't have that if you take in mind that specification and control limits. And finally, that everyone wants, every company, is the customer satisfaction. Because if you have that customer satisfaction, your sales will stand, or maybe will grow up. So that's all. This is my first video about differences between control limits and specification limits.